Hey everyone, time to begin on the co-op side of things for my regionals review for the Darksphere regionals that occurred last weekend. My co-op deck, well, it's a misnomer to say it's my co-op deck because it isn't. I basically net decked it the night before from Netrunner DB. It was the first place co-op from the Atlanta regionals, and apparently not just one, but three people were playing basically variations of the deck. And turns out NEH Fast Advance is still pretty strong. Even without much practice, I still managed to pilot it very well, dropping no games on the day except to one against Lila, where I massively agenda flooded. It was a bad matchup anyway. So, why is this deck so strong? Well, I won't claim to be a perfect pilot or a master of this deck, but I'll try to explain why, in my opinion, this deck is pretty well positioned. So let's start off with my deck, which is basically this entire deck with one single card change. Changing one Turnpike to an Enigma for more stopping power. So why is this deck so good? Simply put, this deck wants to forge external economic alliances. The only alliance card in this deck is Mumble Temple, but that's all you need. Even though you run 3 city halls, which cause influence, all you need is to tutor the 3 Mumble Temples because they're just so good. You really want the economic alliance to get going, and you don't have to worry because you have the political clout to ensure that the voters in your region will back you up on this economic alliance. Wait, what? No! But yes, the Alliance and Mumbai City Hall in particular makes this deck so expedient because you can set up both your economy and your card draw so quickly. That is ridiculous. And as we all know, economy and card draw are the two fundamentals of this game. When you have that set up, you can have a very good game. You'll go insanely fast. And this is one reason why I think it still does well against Wizard. Wizard might be able to trash your assets for free each turn, but they can only trash one each turn. If you are bursting your assets out in threes, that means spending each turn, spending 3 clicks on each turn, installing 3 assets. Wizard cannot keep up with that. Valencia with Scrubber or Valencia Rebirth into Wizard are both much bigger threats because bad publicity makes this deck a lot worse. So I think that's a far worse matchup than the Wizard matchup, to be honest. But I didn't actually end up playing against either of them during the tournament, so I cannot really comment further than that. So as I said, the economy will mostly be used for rezzing your Sansan City grids, which you really want to fast advance, and the toll booths. Toll booths are such a good piece of ice now. It basically is really one of the few pieces of ice that does anything right now with the prevalence of David, which counters a lot of ambient ice, your wraparounds, your archangels. So yeah, having 2 toll booths and the ability to res them most of the time is pretty huge. And of course, it bears no mentioning that if your opponent is Shaper, they definitely cannot keep up with asset spam. If they're criminal, they might be able to, but they have to set up quickly as well. Fast advance is still amazing. Against criminal, and some anarchs like Wizard of Valencia, they generally don't run plot. Your fast advance is good. You can easily run away the game. Make a run for their money with a whole bunch of fast advance mechanisms. Now, this is not a deck where Sansan City Grid is one use. You do not score one agenda on Sansan and let the runner trash the Sansan. That is not a good idea. Ideally, you want the Sansan to stick for as long as possible. So in almost all of my games, I end up protecting the Sansan grid with a piece of ice. And because this deck runs so much money, especially with Mumble Temples, you can actually afford to res the Sansan grid the turn before you want to score with Mumble Temples, and then defend it after you score it with the refresh Mumble Temple credits. It's actually quite amazing. Being able to defend your Sansan grids is a huge deal because this means that scoring subsequent agendas is much easier. You know, being able to score BU without having to expend an Astro token is actually a huge deal. And more importantly, it also distracts them from your centrals, which is one of the main downfalls of this deck. Because I run so few ice, central digging is a huge problem, which is why I run no fewer than the 3 full cyber decks via suites. Need to protect against those medium digs. Doesn't do anything against RNDIs, unfortunately, but this deck should be able to score out faster than the RNDIs come pummeling at you. The 1 Biotic Labor is good for those asset spam anti-asset matchups, as I mentioned. If they're trashing all your Sansans, you need the Biotic Labor to score your first Astro. Now, the key of this deck is the shipment of Sansans from Sansans, which does the majority of the heavy lifting versus clot decks, Shaper clot decks, noise decks, etc. Shipment from Sansan Once you have the first Astro Script scored, those decks have to respect the possibility of any subsequent install in any subsequent turn being an Astro Script. They will then be forced to bring their clock out, which means they can spend a subsequent turn purging. This is important because regular Fastro decks cannot bait the clock without sacrificing an agenda. Often what you would do in a regular Fastro deck is to use a Palooza, put it in the Sand server, and bait their clock out. So they'll run it, they'll steal the Exploder Palooza, but now their clock is purgeable. With this deck, you don't have to worry about that. You can bait them out with random cards. I've baited so many clocks out with Mumbai City Hall, it's ridiculous. And yeah, that makes the game so much easier. Shipment from Sand is also very crucial against criminals because this means you can actually score from 0 credits, which is a huge deal because you don't have any tech punishment. So once you have an Astro squad, they can't simply siphon lock you and hope to win. They need to keep R&D locked, they need to ensure that you have no agendas in hand. Shipment from Sand is an incredibly good card and should be run in a lot of Fastro decks nowadays. It makes the deck a lot smoother and it gives you outs against matchups that are not very good for you. Sweet is there because I expected a lot of Andromeda, especially with Orva Turning Wheel now being a thing. The ability to get 8 credits at the start of the game is absolutely huge, especially if you start with the Biotic Labor and Astro Script hand. Yeah, so that's mostly it. Ice is just very standard issue, very little ice as you noticed, so you really have to be very careful about the mulligans, and you probably have to let a couple of agendas go in the early game, because you won't have ice to defend both HQ and R&D. But with your insane card draw, if they can't find the Sensi Actors Unions before you rest them, you should be able to get a lot of these ice in no time at all. And it must be mentioned that the agenda suite is pretty solid. There are no breaking news here, which is kind of a surprise considering that it is definitely the second best NBN agenda, possibly the second best agenda in the game. 2 tags for a 2 advanced agenda is so broken. But this deck cares not about tags. This deck wants to win fast. This deck doesn't rely on slowing down the runner. So I don't need breaking news. There's only one pointer in here, and that's the 15 minutes. But I find that it's so easy to score in most games. Because when you can steal it from your opponent, by reshuffling it in your deck, you can easily draw it out later on, or find the fast track to score it. And yeah, outside from that, because it doesn't run breaking news, it only runs one pointer, it means that you only have 10 agendas, as opposed to the standard 11 agendas in most NBN decks, giving you that much lower of an agenda density. Not to mention, one of them is an NAPD contract which they must pay money to steal. Quite a big deal considering that this deck wants to win early. So all in all, this has a much more solid agenda spread in my opinion than typical NBN, so you are less likely to lose on any runner that goes central digging. So that's this deck in a nutshell. It is remarkably good versus the slower criminals such as Geist, Ian Sterling. It's also pretty good against most shapers because they cannot contest your assets. You can make R&D very taxing with double toe booth or something similar, and simply score out by fast advance and baiting out those clots. The noise matchup is also pretty good because the imps are no match for your asset spam. You have a lot of cyberdexes, and because of low agenda density, your noise mills are not that effective. I cannot comment on the wizard matchup, and I think the Valencia matchup might actually be pretty bad if they pack Rebirth and Scrubbers. But criminals might just be the worst possible matchup. Desperado, security testing means that they can trash your stuff. While they can't contest your Astro Scripts, while they can't contest your meaty code gates, they do pack an awful ID. Leela Patel knocks you down while you're trying to score, and boy, will you score a lot of genders. So that is definitely a weak matchup for this deck. I think that's all I want to talk about this deck today. I think the more interesting aspects of this deck will be reviewed through the playthroughs, which will be coming out in subsequent videos, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, enjoy your tribal temples.
Tribe has spoken. It's time for you to go. Goodbye.